Okay, boys and girls. So this is going to be your small group for the next about 10 to 15 minutes. We are going to go more in depth about the main ideas and supporting details and how to make better use of your notes when using or when reading your informational texts. Okay, so a little bit ago we read a section of When Lunch Fights Back, and we read 2 pages of it, and it talked about the biologist Robert Young working with the 2 spots and his experiments with them and what they did. So can someone tell me what he found? Do you know what he found?
2 spots?
So he found, yes, he found that 2 spots sacrifice for each other, right? They sacrifice one member of the group when they're being attacked so that the rest of them can survive. Okay? So I want you to take out your own books and analyze them and think about what they're really about. Okay. And I also want you to think and choose a couple of main ideas from your text that you think that you'll be able to use, because we are going to use them a little later. Okay. Do you have your couple of ideas in your head? Okay. Perfect. So we are going to be working with cluster webs. Has anyone ever heard of a cluster web? Yeah, you've heard of one? Okay, perfect. So you'll have kind of an idea of what we're doing. So we're going to use cluster webs to figure out what our section that we read is really trying to tell us. Okay, so do you know what a cluster web is then? Do you know a definition?
It's a web of ideas.
A web of ideas, perfect. Okay, so yes, it's a better way to explore the ideas of what the section is telling you and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to start out and I'm going to draw a circle right in the center. Okay. And you guys have a piece of paper, so you guys are going to do the same thing I do about our section over When Lunch Fights Back. Okay, so what was the main idea of the section that I read?
Scientists.
Scientists, yes. Okay, so in this section, it was Robert Young. Okay, so we would put Robert Young in the middle. Okay, so Robert Young. So then in a cluster web, we have ideas branching out from each other that correlate. And so our first thing that we're going to talk about with Robert Young was the goals that he has for his research. So we have goals. And then we're going to talk about the different questions that he has and that he asked during the process. Okay, then we are going to discuss his findings. And then we're going to correlate this with some of the social studies standards where they talk about choices and consequences. Okay, so this is our cluster web so far. Now we are going to discuss different aspects of these that correlate with one another, okay? So can someone tell me one of the goals that Robert Young had throughout this section? Yes.
Protect 2 spots.
Protect 2 spots, good. Okay, so we're gonna branch this one off, and cluster webs can go as far as you want them. We're only gonna do 3 layers. So this is the first, this is the second, and then we're gonna do 1 more, which is what we're doing right now. So yes, protect 2 spots. Very good. So then one thing that goes along with that is another one of his goals was to keep them away from the turbines. So that's just a little more specific. So we'll do keep them away from turbines. Okay. So then if we kept reading the section, then we could come up with many more goals, but we're going to stop there and we are going to move on to questions. So does anyone know some of the questions that Robert Young asked throughout the section?
Would scaring the fish be a solution?
Yes, good job. Okay, so he was asking, would scaring the 2 spots be a solution? Okay, so would scaring the 2 spots be a solution? And so that's basically, he wants to know if scaring the 2 spots would be a solution to keeping them away from turbines. Okay, so then another question that goes along with that is how to keep 2 spots out of the turbines. So those go together. How to keep 2 spots out of turbines. Okay, so how did he figure out how to keep 2 spots out of turbines? Did he figure it out? No, he didn't. He did find out why they go into turbines, though, and why, what happens when they were attacked and what happens when they are scared and when he scares them, okay? So what's one finding that he found? Yes.
They turn on one another.
They turn on one another. Good. So we'll write, they turn on one. Okay, perfect. So then another finding that goes along with that is that he found that they sacrifice themselves. So although they turn on one of their members, it's so that they're sacrificing that one fish for all the rest of the group, because the predator usually goes for just that one fish instead of the whole group. So we're gonna put sacrifice. Okay, is this all making sense so far?
Yes.
While you examine it, yes. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to go on to our last one, which is choices and consequences, which is what's going to correlate with the social studies. So in social studies, we learn that all choices have consequences, whether they're good or bad. Consequences aren't always bad. Sometimes they're good. Okay, so we found that Robert Young, he made the choice to study the 2 spots, and he found that they sacrificed themselves. He learned more by examining them. Okay, so that was the consequence of his choice of actually experimenting and digging in and researching on these. So we're gonna say conduct, since he made the choice to conduct experiment, he found that they sacrificed themselves. Okay, we're going to attach that one. Sorry, it's getting a little sloppy up there. Okay, and then we're going to move on and we're going to go to the fish, the 2 spots. So at the end of the chapter, it states that as humans, we consider the consequences of our actions. Animals don't. They simply act in the way that evolution has shaped them to act. So even though they don't consider their consequences, they still have consequences. Does that make sense? So their choice that they make is to bite one of their members and leave them for the predator so that everyone else can get away. Okay? So they make the choice to turn on one another. So we'll say turn on one another. And the consequence is that one 2 spot dies. And the rest live. Okay. So this is our finished cluster web. Okay. Does everyone understand by examining it, does it make sense? Yes, it makes sense. Okay, perfect. So then we are going to flip over your paper, and you are going to create another cluster web. You're going to draw it right now, and then once you go back to your seats with the rest of the class, you're going to make your own with your own informational texts. Okay, so discussing with your partner, discuss one thing you learned today. Okay, did you guys discuss? Can someone raise their hand and tell me one thing they learned today? Yes, do you have one?
I learned that Robert Young found that they sacrifice one another.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so how do you think you can use your new skills that you learned today in the future? Of like interpreting, analyzing, using these in your notes. Yes.
Helps me break down the book and understand what's actually going on.
Good. So this does make you understand it a lot more. And this is a lot nicer of a way than just taking bullet notes in your notebook, right? It's a little more fun, and it helps you see it a little better and how things correlate and their relationships. Okay, so now you guys, we learned about how to make a cluster web. We learned when to use it, those different kinds of things. And so now you're going to go back to your seat, and you are going to do your own cluster web with your own informational text. Okay?